Fantasy and Some Flights, exploring the realms of beer, board games, books, and bourbon.
Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy and Some Flights podcast. I'm Nelson.
I'm Dalton.
You took a sip, like you know what's coming. Like I started saying that you took a sip of water, and like you know you're about to have to say something. So I don't know why you would do that.
It's like I am fairly familiar with how long it takes you to say that.
Okay, that's fair.
Like my timing on it is pretty dialed in at this point.
Okay, and that's fair. Okay, I just like, saw that.
I appreciate that you kept going too. Like I saw you see it, and you're like, I'm just gonna keep going.
Yeah, he's gonna have to figure this out. He has dug this hole for himself. Right. He needs to figure it out. So, well, I mean, like after 2 years of doing this, which surprise, this is our 2-year anniversary episode. Hallelujah, let's do it. So, so we've got a special. So we're labeling this a special episode for our 2-year anniversary. Yep. And what we are doing is we are reviewing and relisting our top 5 board games and our top 5 books, which is our first 2 episodes ever published under this podcast. Yeah. And so I'm excited. There's a lot more change than I thought there was going to be.
I know, I was too. I thought it would be like pretty stagnant. I thought it'd be like in books, nothing changed. So
yeah,
we're just pasting the audio from the, but that's not it. I think we both have it. There's still some that are consistent, but we have a decent bit of movement. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun to talk about. So you have in this episode 10 board games and 10 books coming at you to look forward to.
Assuming that there's no crossover. So
that's true.
Which is probably not a great assumption.
It's not. We like a lot of the same things. So probably less than that, but you have at most.
Yeah. I'm really excited to get into it. I think we are going to skip our flights, or not flights. Oh, goodness gracious. No, that would be horrible. Yeah. We are not going to skip the flights. We are going to skip the table and the mind section just because we want this to be a reasonable length and I have to go to bed before 3 a.m. And so, so because we are listing out a lot, let's jump straight into flights and then we'll start.
Sounds good, bud.
Dalton, what's on your flight tonight?
So my flight, I wish that I had a better whiskey for our celebratory episode. Yeah, I also feel doubly bad because it was a Christmas present, but it was a really well thought out Christmas present. So my now fiance and I, this was not my congratulations, by the way. Yeah, thank you. But my fiance and I had taken for a trip. We had gone to Journeyman Distillery in Michigan, and we've had at least one whiskey on the podcast from them. And so I was gifted from a soon-to-be family member a whiskey from that distillery, kind of like with respect to that. But I really feel like they just screwed up this whiskey, like, and it's a bit of a shame because like I tried their like flagship rye, their Last Feather rye, and I did like that. I thought it was very good. And this is another rye. It's called Not a King Rye Whiskey. It's called that in honor of George Washington, like not wanting to be a king. Oh, cool. It's got a picture of George Washington. It's not a king whiskey. You know, it's all very cool. I think the best description because I had to like look for reviews for this one because I was like, what am I tasting? Like that is so weird and probably bad. And someone described it as gun barrel oil. And I was like, that's it.
Oh, geez, that's not good.
It's not like, and I own a gun, and so I know what gun barrel oil or gun cleaning oil or whatever like smells like. I don't know what it tastes like because I'm not an idiot. At least not that much. But
or at least you didn't. Right, but you did firsthand research for this podcast. You're gonna drink it right now.
Right. We're gonna do a blind taste test, and I think I would pick it on a blind taste test.
Is this the whiskey or the gun barrel oil? That's actually not a great comparison to make. So I'm sorry that you are drinking that.
I know. I think on its own, as much as I'm bashing it, it's more of just like a weird aftertaste. Like it's not like the whole thing. You would obviously taste the difference. It is like a nice rye. Like it has in the front, it has like some nice rye flavors, but it just has this really odd lingering aftertaste. That's like it tastes like what gun barrel oil smells like. Bummer. I think I might, under some circumstances, I might give it 2. The only reason I would give it 1 cheers, or I'm going to give it 1 cheers, I think, and the main reason is because they just have Last Feather rye, and I think that's a very good rye. And so they just, like, this same distillery has a similar rye at a similar price point, similar alcohol percent and everything, and I just think it's better. So, like, I think you should get that one.
That's frustrating.
It was disappointing because it was a really thoughtful gift. It was a really nice, like, they knew I like whiskey. They wanted to like give me a whiskey that would work. It just happens to have this very odd aftertaste that I wasn't expecting. So So I wish I had a better one to share for our celebratory 2-year anniversary episode. Instead, I have gun barrel oil. I mean, Not a King rye whiskey by Journeyman. So
I like rye whiskeys. I know that there are people out there that like rye whiskeys. I know that a lot of people like to use rye whiskeys to make mixed drinks. Do you think that this would lose some of that aftertaste and still retain some of those initial flavors that you like in like a Manhattan or something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I did water it back just to see if it would help, and it's kind of like that was the only taste it retained. Like, no, it didn't like stand up. It was just like afterwards, I was like, this might be worse.
This is worse. This is way worse.
Way worse. That's a Bill Burr
Two
reference.
people will get that. Yeah, 2 people will get that, and I love those 2 people. So
exactly. So I don't know. I feel like since I have the bottle, I may use it that way.
Okay.
But I believe that there are far better ryes to use. I think you would be basically trying to fix the whiskey by making a Manhattan out of it, and your result would be a not very good Manhattan that you could have just made with a honestly cheaper whiskey, like a Knob Creek rye or something.
Bummer. Yeah,
that would taste better. So,
well, go do some field tests. Report back.
All right. Yes, sir.
Aye, General.
Aye, Captain.
Okay, well, that's too bad.
It's too bad, but it makes for a good laugh. So.
Well, I'm going with the opposite end of the spectrum with the 4 cheers. So I am drinking Haze by Treehouse Brewing Company. And so when I went to PAX, Professor Meg and Sheer Boredom, who are both from the Boston area, kept telling me how incredible Treehouse Brewing is. Are you familiar with Treehouse Brewing at all?
No, I just looked it up because I was like curious if I had seen it before. But I think that's because I was like, oh, Haze, I may have heard of that. And then I'm like, no, I'm an idiot. I've just heard of hazy IPAs. Like
hazy IPAs, yeah.
There's a million of those.
And you have not heard of Treehouse Brewing Company, and I had not heard of Treehouse Brewing Company, which apparently is the incorrect answer.
So apparently a cardinal sin.
So Treehouse Brewing Company is a very famous, in quotes, I guess, like I guess locally famous, but also nationally famous. Like now that it's like one of those things that now that whenever you buy a car, you see that car everywhere type thing.
Right.
Like, have you ever experienced that?
Yeah.
That's what this beer feels like. So Roberto got me a couple of beers from there, and there's a couple of different ones that I've had like throughout. And so tonight I'm drinking Haze. And so this is an Imperial Double IPA. So sorry for the second half of this podcast. I'll go ahead and apologize now for the slurring. But it is fantastic. All 3 beers that he got me were incredible. I don't even know if I could rank them, but I absolutely love Haze. So this is a very fruity IPA, which typically I'm a bigger fan of the bitter IPAs. I enjoy the fruity IPAs. I'm just typically a bigger fan of the bitter ones, and this is a very fruity, a very refreshing, a very excellent IPA. If you gave this to me blind and told me that it was 8.2, I would laugh. Like it just doesn't feel like it's an 8.2.
Yeah,
it's a 90 IBU, and it also doesn't feel that bitter. So
wow,
it is on. I had to look it up. So on Beer Advocate, it has a score of 100.
That's all right.
It's
a fair score.
And it is ranked number 79 of all time.
Wow.
And another one that he got me is Green, which is number 78. So it was just kind of like, okay, this is just really cool. It's a fantastic beer. I thank you so much, Roberto, for getting it for me. It's incredible. 4 cheers, 100%. I need to go visit them, and I will stop by and buy some Haze along the way. So.
Yeah. I was just wondering. I was like, I wonder if they distribute all the way out here. Probably not. But they do have a pretty distinctive like can, right? Like I feel like you would, if you saw it, you would know.
Yeah, that's Haze by Treehouse Brewing Company. Highly recommend. I don't actually know if you could ever find it outside of Treehouse Brewing. I actually don't know. So. If you can pick it up, you will not be disappointed.
Very cool.
Your wallet will be very sad, but like, don't be disappointed. So that's what I'm drinking, and I'm happy with my choice. I'm sorry you're not happy with yours.
That's all right.
Let's talk about our favorite things.
Yeah. That's right. We have an episode to record. Specifically the top 5.
And like now that I'm doing this, like we should come up with like a top 5 whiskey and beer episode. That would be kind of fun.
That would be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah,
that would be
look
fun.
At this.
Yeah.
These ideas,
man. Cool.
Cool.
We should do this.
We should. Okay.
Like we should
More
record a
promises
podcast
on the podcast. We should. We should record a podcast. I bet we'd be good.
We should. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so we're doing our top 5 board games and our top 5 books. We split these up into 2 episodes when we initially recorded, but we are going to do this in one, so rapid fire mode.
Yeah. Those episodes are also like 20 or 30 minutes long, so I think it's valid to try and extend here.
Yeah, and that's true. And like we said, when we kind of decided that we were going to combine these, I didn't think that there was going to be a lot of movement in our list, but I think we're going to see a lot of new names to these lists since 2 years ago.
Right.
And so
the other good thing is like for the length anyways is nothing on here. Well, I'm sure from me, I would say I'm 90-something% sure from you. I don't think there's going to be any new names, something there's never been mentioned on the podcast before, right?
Right.
We talk about these books and games all the time because they're our favorites.
Yes.
Now we just have to talk about why. We just have to validate our decisions.
Yep. Alrighty, so let's start with books. And we'll do it similar to how we did our second episode of all time. So we're flipping them. So our first episode was board games, second episode was books. So we're going to start with books this time, and we'll do it the same way as we did last time. You will start with number 5. I will go to my number 5, and we'll ping pong back and forth until we get to our number 1, and then we'll go into board games.
Yeah.
So without any delay, Dalton, number 5 favorite book of all time as of this date, 2022.
So books was really fun because I was trying to think of. So first of all, we consume books slower than we consume board games, just in general.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I expected there to be less movement in the books section, and for me, there was. There was some reordering, but there were a couple of new ones. But I was trying to think of like what are books that I have read multiple times at first, and then I was like, but that may not be fair because some of these books I've read within the last year and they've kind of become, or last couple of years, and they kind of have become favorites, and I just haven't had a chance to like reread them or a reason to, right? So number 5 falls into that category, and this would be Wool. This is a sci-fi book that I talked about, I don't know, maybe I think I read it over the summer. I did read it over the summer.
Okay.
And the more I've thought about it, I'm like, I really want to reread this book, and I read it 6 months ago.
That's awesome.
Basically brand new, but the concept of the book, if you don't remember, is that humanity. It's post-apocalyptic. I say it's sort of sci-fi-ish, but it's really not. It's really a post-apocalyptic book. It's not like a sci-fi in that there's like really advanced technology that throws off the story or something like that. You could probably just consider it maybe like if you could sit there and call Hunger Games sci-fi, then I guess you could call this book sci-fi.
I do not call that
exactly.
Sci-fi.
It's not. It's post-apocalyptic. So, but humanity is kind of isolated to this silo, and the outside world is like really deadly, and so that's why like they can't go out there. And so there are like 144 floors of this silo that go down into the earth, and there's kind of a hierarchy with people living in different tiers based on like wealth and and their kind of like spot within the economy. There's not like it's not like a huge disparity where that like drives a lot of the book, because it's small enough that there can't be a huge like wealth disparity. Everyone kind of has to have their job, but like the like mayor lives in like the upper levels, right, and the like mechanics live down at the bottom. I think the reason it sits here is because it's 5 quote unquote books in one, similar to like how Dune has 3 books, or any of the Stormlight Archive books have like multiple sections, right? And I think they're even titled books even in that. So this one has 5, and it's just a story that keeps you on your toes. It does a really good job with character deaths, like making character deaths believable and like really impactful to the story, and at times like super unexpected. You're like, I did not think that guy was going to die. Like, so it does like some really clever stuff with that. It has a really excellent pacing and just the way that the story like unfolds, and there's always a little bit more mystery, but it always feels like you're finding out a little bit all the time too. And kind of like as one door closes, like 2 more open, and so there's like this development that's going on. It has really well-defined characters, so characters that have like a really good characterization and boundary and like personal story that's going on, and they're kind of you're kind of dropped in media res, right? So the character backstory is kind of being revealed to you over time through like hints in conversation or through like flashbacks or through thoughts of someone, the character remembering something or someone from their past. And I've just really enjoyed it, and I have not even read the next 2 books of the series yet. So it's really funny to like have this be like in my top 5, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I need to go back and read the rest. But I don't know, I can't talk highly enough about it. It was one that really took me by surprise because I read it kind of on maybe not a whim, but kind of like, oh, I need something to read, I guess I'll pick this one up. And then like a couple pages in, I was like, this book is fantastic, and I've really enjoyed it, even just looking back on it since.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's been one of those that when you mentioned it, I was like, yeah, that sounds really cool. And then I completely forgot about it until about 25 seconds ago, or however long you were just talking.
Yeah.
So it is one that I want to revisit, because as I've been reading more books, and like just as like I read books a lot, but just since we've started the podcast, I've been consuming more of those.
Right.
I've grown to know myself, and that I like and I enjoy like apocalyptic stories. Mm-hmm. Like that just is a genre that is interesting to me.
Oh, cool.
And so seeing that it makes it on your top 5 list is really exciting, and something that maybe I'll remember after this episode ends.
Nice. I would love for you to read it. Yeah. I have a couple family members who have read it, but I would love to. You know how it's sort of like how it's really fun to watch someone else play a video game sometimes, like a game that you know really well, and like see them experience it. Like book reading can be similar, right? Where it's like, I love hearing about someone going through and like, what? I can't believe this just happened. You're like, yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Right? Yeah.
Just wait.
Fun. Yeah. Oh, that's great. So, cool. Good choice.
Thank you. What's yours?
So, I would echo your preamble, and that, there are a lot of books on this list that changed, that switched places, that flipped, and it was really something that I was not expecting to happen.
Yeah.
And like I was just saying, that I enjoy the post-apocalyptic genre. One of the other things that I've learned about myself and this has been more recent, probably in the last like 6 months or something, is like I enjoy like comforting books, or like there are books that comfort me. There are books that I enjoy listening to that bring me like, calmness, and that's not that's more familiarity, not necessarily it's a calm book, right? And so those kind of started to penetrate my list. That just may be where I'm at in my life at this time, but it's my list, so I can do what I want.
So I don't have to justify it. Fuck it.
yeah, exactly. And so with that, one of the surprising things, which like, I don't know why it's surprising to me, I made the list, but my number 5 spot is The Hobbit. So
that's adorable.
I just like recently in the last couple of months, I reread The Hobbit, and it is so pleasant. It is so exciting, so nice, so fun. And so, okay, if you don't know what the story is of The Hobbit, then read it. But just kind of the quick synopsis, right? So Bilbo Baggins, who we know and love from Lord of the Rings, is kind of the prequel to Lord of the Rings, right? So he is kind of pulled into this quest by this crazy wizard, a starry guy named Gandalf. Weird, I don't know. And he goes on this quest with a bunch of dwarfs to go steal some gold from this dragon. And it's just like the book is written in... Parts of it are written in second person, so the narrator is talking to you, the reader, and it's like which is really cool and really interesting and really fun. And it is just like it's like someone's telling you a bedtime story, and it's fun, it's whimsical, it's really cool. I love Lord of the Rings. I love the lore of Lord of the Rings, which, like, if we were doing a mind, which we're not, but if we were doing a mind, I would have to mention that Amazon Prime just put out the teaser trailer thing for their new series, which is Rings of Power, is what it's called. Their series is called Rings of Power, and it is an epic 1 minute long teaser trailer of forging, like, the title scene, and it is epic. Anyways, so, and I also just learned... If we were doing the mind, I would say this. I also just learned that they are already signed up for 20 episode seasons and 5 seasons.
Oh, dope.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
man.
We're getting some content, everybody.
That's exciting. That usually, I don't know about usually, that gives me hope that they have like adequate funding in the first season, right? Because a lot of first season of these like big fantasy shows are struggling with just like the actual funding to make, because like there's so much like makeup and extras and computer like that have to go into this, that like they can struggle with that, right? You can tell that there's some budget cuts that have to happen in a TV show. So hopefully that means that they have enough budgeting to make it work.
I mean, Amazon is the one fronting the money, so I don't think that there's a lack of budget there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just love Lord of the Rings. I was trying to figure out, because I knew a Lord of the Rings book was going to fall on this list, and when I was reviewing all of them that I had read, I landed on The Hobbit being at number 5.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think if we don't do like a ton of like top 5 blank, right?
Yeah.
But if we were going to do like top 5 prequels, The Hobbit would definitely make the list.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we're suckers for prequels anyway, but this is one that's specifically done really well, and I think it's done really well because it sets up. It somehow sets up the story without like directly setting up the story, if that makes sense. Like Sauron is like not in it, Frodo's not in it. Like Gandalf's the only character really that is like consistent between the two like storylines.
Right. Yep.
And he even like goes in a completely different direction, right? Like it's a part of the map that is not at all a part of like Lord of the Rings. Really the only like important thing that gets introduced is like Gollum in the ring, and but for some reason it still functions really well as like a setup to what's going to happen, as a setup to the story.
And fun fact, which I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but one of our listeners, Jim, mentioned it, I was talking with him, and he was saying that in the initial release of The Hobbit, in like the first edition of The Hobbit, the Ring of Power that was released, or like the ring that Bilbo and Gollum are doing their riddles over, was not the Ring of Power. And in later
like it was
renditions,
a Ring of Power, but not like the Ring of Power.
I think it was just a ring. Like it was just like it was just a thing. And then after Lord of the Rings came out, J.R.R. Tolkien rewrote it so that it flowed a little bit better. So
gotcha.
It's kind of fun. If you're interested, you can go read that on. I think it's on Wikipedia. Like the original,
like text or whatever.
Text is on there. But I also just love the opening.
Yeah.
In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. It was like, okay, well, what the hell's a hobbit? So
right,
like
it's such good exposition though, right? Like there's a ton of information in those like 3 parts of a sentence, those 3 phrases,
Yeah.
But like it hooks you in. That's a good choice. Excellent. I think that's adorable. I strongly dislike the Hobbit movies, right? But
this is definitely a book list.
Yeah, it's definitely a book list. But I did think that Martin Freeman was a really good casting. I thought he was a really good Bilbo. Like, there's like that scene where he sits down to dinner and he's like made it and his table's all set and he's like all cozy and his fire is going and he's like all ready. And he's like kind of smiling to himself, and then like there's a knock at the door, and he like gives this like look, kind of like looking like over his nose at the door, and you can tell he's just so fucking done already. Like, it's like that expression is like, you nailed it, man. Like, I identify with that so much.
That's the Bilbo I know and love. Yep.
Yeah, I do the same thing when I get phone calls. It's like, why are you inconveniencing me this way?
Yep, that is my life, Monday through Friday.
That's right.
Wait.
Excellent.
No. Alrighty, what's number 4?
Number 4. So we tried to stay away from honorable mentions in the first one. And now that we are more experienced podcasters, I have no such control. And so
good, because I have my honorable mentions as well. So.
Yeah. I really wanted to put The Martian here. So The Martian was my original number 5, I think.
It was your original number 4.
It was my original number 4. Oh man, it almost retained its spot. I really wanted to put it there, and I wanted to almost like honorable mention it alongside Project Hail Mary, because like they're pretty similar, and I enjoyed The Martian's a better book, but I do enjoy them both.
Yeah.
But as I was thinking about it, I was like, I do reread The Martian like fairly often. But I don't know, for whatever reason, I decided I wanted to include a Pendragon book. And I looked over the Pendragon series.
Yes, okay, cool.
And I was like, what is my favorite book from this series? Because I typically, if I want to include a book from the series, I typically end up including the first one, just like for whatever reason. I usually like the first one the best.
Okay.
With Pendragon, if we haven't talked about this, but actually I'm going to do a little summary. We haven't talked about Pendragon in a long time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Pendragon, also, the full title is something much longer that I don't ever remember. It's like... You remember, it's like 8 or 10 words. Like, it's huge.
I don't know. Yeah.
All right, here, 1 second. We have... Okay.
But it's not the King Arthur one.
No, it's not King Arthur, but it's Pendragon, Journey of an Adventure. So it's... or Journal of an Adventure through time and space. Like, that's the...
Dude knows how to SEO.
Exactly. I don't know. That's the title of the series. And it's 10 books. It's written... It feels very episodic. It's written by a guy, DJ McHale, who wrote TV he was a TV writer, and so he's kind of used to episodic style writing. I mean, he wrote this book series because he, at the time, knew that this was like early 2000s, and his vision for it would never fit in a TV series. I think we're actually getting to that point, right? Like now is when it probably could fit into a TV series in terms of what they're able to do. But it can be very fanciful and very sci-fi. And so he chose not to do that. He chose to write it as a book, and I'm glad that he did. It's 10 books. I chose book 8, Pilgrims of Rain.
Okay.
Yes, and I think it's because every time I reread the series, I've reread the series like 3 times, I typically forget the major twist in Pilgrims of Rain, and I'm obviously not going to spoil it. But it's fantastic. And
yes, it is amazing.
It's really, really well done. The story, like, of the series kind of has this idea of there are turning points in worlds, and the main character, Bobby Pendragon, is visiting these worlds as a, like, quote, traveler, and it's his job to help the world kind of go the right way at the turning point. So the turning point can be like many things, but it's basically the idea that there are these really significant points in history, and if it went one way versus the other, then that, you know, would be in the bad timeline versus the good timeline or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's kind of his job. And DJ McHale does a really good job of, like, even though it is kind of episodic and the structure of the story is repeating, it never feels like the same story is being told twice.
Very true.
There's always something new being introduced into either, like, the way that, like, kind of the magic system works or which characters are involved in the story. You're kind of hearing the story from Bobby's perspective as he's writing, like, journals back to his friends at home, right? Which is just present day Earth. So why I chose Pilgrims of Rain is because it's kind of, I think, the last major point that I could think of that the story, like the overarching story arc, has like a major twist on its head that you don't really see. You think you kind of like survived all the twists, right? And like this one has one, you're like, I never would have thought that could happen, right?
Right.
But it totally makes sense once it's revealed to you. You're like, of course, right? Of course that could happen that way.
Yeah.
But I just never considered it. And it really sets the stage for books 9 and 10, which are basically like the climax and falling action. So book 9 and 10 sort of break the mold. They don't quite follow the like episodic template that the previous 8 have followed. They are like the story is ending, so they kind of break the mold, which is appropriate, and it works really well. But Pilgrims is kind of like the last one, and so it kind of has like this last hurrah type feeling to it too, you know, where you're like, this is the last time that like things are kind of normal, and then things are going to break and fall out of control before the climax and end of the story. So I really like the Pendragon series. I wanted to choose a book from it, and so I chose this one as kind of my favorite.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I have 2 Pendragon books on my honorable mentions because I was trying to fit a Pendragon book into my top 5 and I was unable to.
Nice.
And so I'm really glad that you were able to. So
yeah,
I had the Quillian Games and Raven's Rise on my honorable mentions. For kind of Raven's Rise, I really like the introduction. Raven's Rise is book 9.
Yeah.
And I really like the introduction of the ending.
Yeah.
I thought that was really well done. And then the Quillian Games, for what you were saying about Pilgrims of Rain, is that it has a twist that you never saw coming. Mm-hmm. And he you know, because he is this TV writer, he understands how to write these like interesting cliffhangers and interesting like hooks and everything. Even like in book 9, right, you're still coming back, you're like, oh sweet, I need to know what's next. Awesome choice. I'm glad that you were able to fit a Pendragon book into this list.
Yeah. Quillian Games was my second choice, by the way.
Nice. Okay, good.
For favorites, I do really like Quillian Games.
Yeah. Quillian Games is awesome. So for
these are,
my
by the way, we say it's 10 books, but they're pretty consumable. They're not like, they get longer in the series, but books like 1 through like 6 or 7 they're kind of YA, so they're pretty short, pretty consumable.
Yeah.
Like I said, they start to get longer towards the end, but if you are interested in the series, I think the first 2 books are a pretty comparable read to like Mistborn by itself or something, you know?
Yeah.
And I think if you choose to read the first 2 books, you can decide if you want to read the rest of the series or not. But that's a good point to be like, this is kind of what the series is going to be like, give you a feel for it, and without taking too much of your time.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So my number 4 is another one of these comfort reads for me, and I don't know why it wasn't on my initial list, or any of these books from the Harry Potter series were on my initial list, but I chose The Half-Blood Prince from the Harry Potter series, written by J.K. Rowling. She's kind of
that's interesting. I've never heard of this.
Yeah.
J.K. who?
So I think it's rolling. I'll look it up. I'll fix it in post.
Okay. Cool.
So I love the Harry Potter series. It's just the lore that I grew up with that I really enjoy, that I still enjoy. I probably reread the books once a year, just because they're just super easy to consume, super easy to listen to, and they're just fun, right? Yeah. And I usually pick up one or two new things every reread through, and so that's always fun. But Half-Blood Prince is my favorite out of that series. It's my favorite. It made it to my top 5 books, and that's mainly because first off, this is a book list, not a movie list. I feel like I need to keep iterating that for almost every single one of these.
Yeah.
But the book is they take a deep dive into Voldemort's past. So Voldemort is the big evil guy in Harry Potter, and diving into his past, which they don't really do very well in the movie, but in the book, it's a super interesting psychological study, I think, of of why he is the way he is. You know, he was always meant to be this evil person, but you can kind of see some of the... I don't want to sound like I'm sympathizing with Voldemort. That sounds wrong. But like, that is absolutely not what I'm trying to do. But I think that it was a really interesting kind of study in the psychology of him growing up. And that's why I really like the Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah. Yeah, and we talked about it in villains episodes, right? Like that just evil monsters don't make good villains. You know?
Yes.
You need monsters you need the bad guy to not be a monster. You need them to be like relatable. And the best villains make people say like, oh, would I have done the same thing? You know?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what Half-Blood Prince is able to establish is like, at first, Voldemort is just... who should not be named. He's just like this literally nameless evil that you're like, oh, he's just really bad. And over the course of the series, he becomes more and more human. And in some ways, that makes him scarier.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about Harry Potter a lot. So let's hop on to your number 3. What's third on your list?
Yeah, third on my list, I again wanted to highlight a book from a series. This time I did choose the first book. So I chose The Black Prism, which is the first book in the Lightbringer series.
Yeah. Okay, sweet.
And when I started doing this list, I was like, what are books that I have read multiple times? And then I kind of rephrased that to like, what are books that I would want to reread multiple times? And this is one that falls very strongly into that category. I'm really looking forward to rereading Lightbringer as a series, but specifically like The Black Prism. I think it is the best book in the series. It has the best sort of exposition of the characters, and then it has the best sort of like single contained story arc, and it has some really, really solid twists in it. Some things that you just like, you did not expect that could happen or would happen, and then when it's revealed to you, you're like, I get it, like I can totally see that, but I did not expect it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's so hard to talk about without spoiling, but I will just since we haven't talked about it in a while, I'll just briefly describe the magic system. This book we talked about a lot when we were talking about like hard and soft magic kind of early in the podcast. It was a book that we had stumbled upon because it was recommended by Sanderson, who sort of like piloted this idea of hard versus soft magic, right? And he was kind of holding up Lightbringer as a series of like, this is a series that does hard magic very well. And so if you like a lot of Sanderson novels, then this would be a good series to try. It's by Brent Weeks. The way the magic system works is that people have an affinity for a certain color, so they can sort of literally look at a portion of the color spectrum. Some people have access to only one, and they would be called like monochrome or monochromatic. And then some people have access to multiple, like they might have access to green, orange, and yellow magic or something like that. And they're basically able to absorb that color into their system and then use that sort of energy source to create Luxin, which is sort of a physical manifestation of the color. And based on the color, it has like different properties. So blue is very crystalline and very sharp. Red is very energy and not very material, and so it's very hot. I think red is actually sort of like goopy and like magma-like, and then like sub-red, which we know is infrared, but in the book they call sub-red. Basically, the spectrum below red, it would be sort of like heat. And then there's one person who's sort of like both a religious and a government figure called the Prism, who has access to all types of light.
The Avatar.
Yeah, the Avatar. Yeah, it actually has a lot of feeling of that for sure.
Yeah.
And so the Prism is a character. There's also a main character, Kip, who is not well named, but that's kind of a boring name, but who has really good progression throughout the story. He like starts as like this really like overweight kid, and he has like some like body image issues, and that like plays into his character a lot, into his decision making, and so it does a really good job of just kind of highlighting that struggle for him. And it's not something that he just like overcomes and goes away. It's something that's always with him, but his like his lack of confidence in himself and his lack of a positive self-image really affects him as a character, and that's kind of his characterization, his personal struggles that he's overcoming. So just a lot of really good characters, a lot of good magic system world building, and some really, really awesome twists is why this one, at least the first book, kind of made the list.
That's great. So when I was making my list, I was kind of trying to predict where you were going to fall, if there was going to be any changes, and I knew that there was going to be something from the Lightbringer on your list, just because of how much you enjoy that series. And so I'm glad to see that I was right.
You win. You win the
I win. I win the podcast. I agree. I think that The Black Prism is a great book. This is a positive podcast. I will just say that, like, getting towards like book 3, 4 is where I've gotten to twice, I think.
Okay.
And I've just kind of like struggled. And I like, that's not saying that it's a bad. I just think that there's a lull there, and just for whatever reason, I just kind of give up. I did that same thing to Breaking Bad, right? Like, and so my judgment is not the right one. Like, so I finally got past Breaking Bad after watching the season like 3 times, right? And then after that, I just never stopped watching it. So, like, with that being said, and I've heard from you that it gets a lot better, but that first book is so good. Yeah. That first book is incredible. It's such a great magic system. Being from, like, my background is literally optical engineering, right? So I love colors. And so it just speaks to me. I love the magic. I love the story. I love the twist that you were talking about. And so go read it, because
the first book really twist is so good. There's usually one massive twist in every book, but the first book twist is it's so good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love it.
Yeah, and I agree overall actually that Lightbringer is long. I mean, it's it's a hefty book, and it's fair to lose connection to it. I remember reading it and being in parts where, we've talked about this in audiobooks where you're like, I don't remember what's happened in the last 60 seconds. Like,
I've been listening for 30 minutes, but I don't know what just happened.
I got disengaged somehow. And there are a couple of times where that happens in Lightbringer. I think Brent Weeks in general kind of struggles with that from his other series that we've read, that it's like, I think you might need a different editor or something. I don't know. Something's got to change.
Right.
Because there can be some fluff that needs to be cut out. I think the Black Prism of the 5 is the one that's not that way. Like, it's pretty compact, a lot of good stuff happens. But the other ones, I think you keep reading because you already like the series.
Yep. Good choice.
Nice. All right. Number 3.
Number 3 on my list. So this is a position that changed book, but did not change series. And so my number 3, 2020, so 2 years ago, was Mistborn. And now my number 3 is Hero of Ages. So Mistborn is the first book in the series, and Hero of Ages is the third and final of that first arc of the series. And a couple of reasons for that change. One, I think Mistborn is a phenomenal book. I love that book. I love it. It's incredible. It's in my honorable mentions, if I was allowed to say those.
Right.
But we have talked on the podcast before about how Sanderson's books falls into this cosmere where a lot of the stories kind of tie themselves together. And as I've become more involved and more understanding of that cosmere, the Hero of Ages ties into that a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why it's kind of taken that spot for me.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
And I really like the ending of Hero of Ages.
Yeah.
And I have chills just thinking about it right now.
Yeah.
Like some of the choices that the characters make are right there, and you're just like, that makes me like really sad, but I totally get it.
Yeah.
Type choices. And I think that is just so great, like, of Sanderson to be able to do. His writing style is great. He was able to tell 3 amazing stories in that trilogy. And Hero of Ages, I think, just completely capped it.
Yeah.
As phenomenal.
Totally agree. I think
so.
I would think if we were going to do top 5 endings to a trilogy,
yes,
right, it might make a run for number 1. I think it's
it's good.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's either this or Lord of the Rings. I mean,
that's exactly what I was thinking. It's either this or Return of the King.
Yeah, well, and Return of the King has to be like the first half of Return of the King. So with that caveat, I would have to say first half of the book of Return of the King, I would have to say probably you're right. Hero of Ages is that top spot.
Yeah, it's that good. And book two is good. It's not even just fine. Like, it's a good book.
Yeah.
It's just that Mistborn and Hero of Ages are like they're
top tier.
Yeah, they're top tier. They are very, very special. Mistborn just in general was in my honorable mentions. So
Nice.
I think this
Good.
is a very good choice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I tried.
I'm so proud of you.
Thanks.
This is going way better than the first time we did it.
Yeah.
All right.
What's number 2?
Number 2 for me, this is my first repeat. So number 2 for me is Red Rising.
Okay.
and
Wow, that jumped a couple spots.
It jumped. I think, wasn't it number 5? I think it was number 5.
It was number 5, yeah.
The more I think about this book, I'm like, you know what? I could not make an improvement to this book. I think
It's so good.
It's really, really good. And I think this is one where, like, if I was going to pick a favorite book from a trilogy or from a series, this one's an easy choice. Red Rising is a good step above the other two, and the other two are still good. And I do really like the way that the series ends. I don't think that the third book is overall like the best book, but I do really like the way that the series ends. And so I think both of them are very much worth reading. But Red Rising, I have read at a frequency of more than once per year since the first time I've read it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Because the first time I read it was, I think, 2018.
Okay.
And I've read it 4 times, I believe, since then.
Oh, geez.
Because it was late summer of 2018 was the first time I read it. And I know that only because I was moving. And like I remember packing up my place and listening to it for the first time.
Nice.
And now we're in early 2022 and I've read it 4 times. So
that's crazy.
It's just the best. Like, I know we talk about it a lot. I don't want to, like, we've already, we've talked. Man,
we have a whole episode on it.
We have a whole episode on it, so I really can't spend too much time on it.
It's a very heavy spoiler episode, so if you haven't read it, listen or read the book first, then go listen to the epised.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say.
Like, misname one of the characters in my second favorite book of all time.
Yeah.
I call him Cactus for half the episode, so that's great.
Cactus, yeah.
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 When his name is Tactus.
Yeah.
Dude.
No,
we even did an episode just about, like, or not an episode. We did half the episode based on the board game, right? We brought in Jamie for that.
Yeah. Red Rising is such a great IP. I don't know what more to say than what we've already said, but I mean it's a great kickoff to the trilogy.
Yeah.
It is epic sci-fi. It is kind of Hunger Games, Harry Potter, sci-fi all mixed together, and the characters are super like deep. They're super exciting, super different.
Some of the most well-defined characters that we've talked, and we talked about this in the episode, but if you haven't listened to it, we mentioned that like there's a caste system. So there's like Reds, and that's a group of people, and they have a genetic modification that makes them quote Reds, and they have a job to do. And then there's Golds, and the same thing. And so there's kind of this caste system would make you feel like all the Golds would feel the same and all the Reds would feel the same.
Yeah.
And somehow he introduces, 60 characters over the course of the book, and every single one of them feels like an individual. It's I don't know how you did this. This is an incredible accomplishment.
It would have been really easy to write all of the Reds the same.
Yeah.
And every single Red is different, unique, and grows.
Yes.
And I think that's the other thing is throughout Red Rising and then throughout the trilogy, there is a lot of character growth, which is just excellent to see.
Yeah.
So
I found that since reading it I believe would be like my number 1 recommended book. I think number 2 would be Mistborn.
Okay. And
that would be very close. But most of the time, if I have someone, they're like, "Hey, Dalton, I know you read a lot of books. What should I read next?" I can usually find a reason that they will like Red Rising.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good bridge into sci-fi too, because it's not super sci-fi. It's not super like there's this wacky tech and we're way out in space and none of that. It takes place within our solar system, but the technology doesn't really influence the storyline all that much. It does in a reasonable way, but not in such a sense that you lose track of how the characters are doing what they're doing. That can be the problem with sci-fi. Like, how is the character able to do this? And that does not happen in Red Rising. It's very approachable, very fundamental, very grounded, and it just makes for a really great story. So
nice.
Yeah,
excellent.
It's the biggest jump. You're right. It went from I think of both lists, that was the one that moved the most.
Yeah, maybe we'll see.
Oh, I guess I meant for me. I'm looking at the ones that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have no idea what it moved for you. I just mean.
I was like, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but maybe not. Nothing did, but it's nice to keep them on the hook.
That's right. Keep them interested. Nice suckers. All right, tell us number one or number two for you.
Number two. Number two for me is the exact same as it was number two 2 years ago. Two. I feel like I'm saying two a lot. So this is that 8.2% kicking in.
Yep.
So number two for me is Ender's Shadow.
Nice.
And so Ender's Game is one of the most iconic sci-fi books of all time, where they take children that have aptitudes for command, take them to command school so that they can fight the invading alien species, which is called the Formic, when they know that they're coming back to Earth. And so Ender's Game is all about the commander Ender, who has been kind of chosen to be this person that's going to lead the defense of Earth. Excellent book. Ender's Shadow, on the flip side, it's the same story told from a different perspective, which is kind of like another child in the command school that Ender goes through. Yep. His name is Bean. And so I love Ender's Game, and I think that Ender's Game, you have to read Ender's Game before you read Ender's Shadow. The reason that Ender's Shadow makes it on this list and Ender's Game does not is that Ender's Shadow is a fantastic book, and it makes Ender's Game better.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, for a top 5 favorite book, I love the literary device and the execution of this book and how he changed Ender's Game and how the way that I look at a different book so well. And that's why it's number 2, just because it's pretty unique in that sense. It's like, oh, cool, I'm going to tell the same story. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds fun.
Right.
But it like all of the background information is kind of revealed in this book, and you get to see it from a different character's perspective and like how they are going through their emotions and how they, analyze the situation differently. It's just, it's amazing. It's incredible. If you have read Ender's Game and have not read Ender's Shadow, do yourself a favor and go read Ender's Shadow. If you have not read either of those, stop this podcast right now, go listen to Ender's Game, and then listen to Ender's Shadow, and then you can come back.
Yeah. Well, then you should listen to our episode about Ender's Game, and then you can come back to this.
That is true. Yeah. Absolutely. Do that.
Yeah. I think it's unsurprising. If anything was going to not change, it would be my number one book, right?
Yep.
And so my number one book is still Ender's Game. And this happened the last time we recorded this, where we went right from Ender's Shadow into Ender's Game.
Yep.
I think the main thing I wanted to say here is, first of all, go listen to Ender's Game and the Ender's Shadow episode. I was surprised in redoing this how little fantasy is in my top 5. Because I think I would say that fantasy is my favorite genre. And I listed one book. I would say Lightbringer is absolutely a fantasy novel. It wouldn't feel like traditional fantasy. Like, there's not dragons and it's not villages. Like, it feels like a very modern society with an advanced magic system.
Yeah.
So it's maybe not even like traditional fantasy, or it's certainly not high fantasy. But 3 of my top 5 are sci-fi. I guess. I don't know. Pendragon, you could go back and forth. Now that I'm looking at it again, Pendragon, you could call a fantasy.
Because it's different worlds. There are some that are fantasy, some that are sci-fi, some that are.
It's very cross-genre. Right? So So that's why maybe I wouldn't, but I would call at least like 2 or 3 of them sci-fi. So I was just kind of just pleasantly surprised by that, I guess. Like, not something I totally expected. But the other thing I wanted to mention here, the reason I was bringing up the fantasy thing, I think of all these books, I had one other thing in honorable mention, and it may come up in yours, and so I'm sorry if I ruin it, but I think Name of the Wind is critically the best book that I have not named. Like, it is. If I was just going to look critically and say this is the best book that I know of, I might actually name of the Wind, and it was the one that it was in my top 5 previously, and I was really wanting to put it back in, and just kind of chose to do it this way. I think if you asked me a week from now, I might have put it in.
Yep.
So, anyways, Go ahead and tell me your number one.
So Name of the Wind was your number 1 2 years ago.
Okay.
2 years ago, I'm sorry, number 3.
Yeah.
In your top 5. Number 1 for me was
Ender's Game.
Yeah. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Number 1 for me 2 years ago was A Wise Man's Fear, which is the second book in that series.
Yeah.
It is not number 1 for me anymore.
Oh, man.
It fell off my list completely, and I think that's a combination. Yeah. It's off both of ours, and I think, at least for me, I think that's a combination of the series not finished, and it's been 11 years since the last book was published, and I think that leaves a sour taste in my mouth.
Yeah, for sure. I think if it was a complete series, it might still be on there.
Yes, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And like all of the Song of Ice and Fire books fell off my list, I think, for a similar reason. And so I like ongoing or completed series. And so
and these feel like neither. They feel
like neither.
Series,
they feel like they've kind of given up. And so at that sense, I've kind of almost taken stock out of them, because it's like, are we ever going to get a conclusion to this series?
Yeah. And it makes it so much harder to recommend,
not.
Right? It's like, I want you to read this because it's fantastic, but I struggle to recommend it because it's not complete.
Yeah. Yep. And so with that being said, I'm going to name a non-complete series. That's my number one. So my number one book, I kind of cheated. I put 2, and that's Rhythm of War / Way of Kings.
Yeah.
And so
incomplete, but this is very much ongoing.
Yes, it's very much ongoing, and that's when I kind of put the caveat of they're kind of dead.
Yeah.
So this is the Stormlight Archives. So Way of Kings is the first book of the Stormlight Archives, and Rhythm of War is the 4th book. And currently, as of this release date, the last book. 3 weeks from now, we'll see. Sanderson writes pretty fast, but we
saying that like, but he doesn't mean last book in terms of it's not intended to be the last book. There's intended to be a 5th book to finish it, but it's the
There's actually intended to be 10 books. So
that's true.
So I think it's gonna. People speculate that it's going to be 2 arcs, so 2 series of 5 in the Stormlight Archives kind of series.
Yeah.
And so the reason I kind of put 2 here and cheated is Way of Kings is a great introduction. It's a fantastic book. It introduces a lot of excellent characters that have so much growth.
Yeah.
It's the first book. It's great. Rhythm of War is new. It's the only book that I haven't read multiple times in this series, but it also, for the same reasons that Mistborn is not on my list and Hero of Ages is now, is that it fleshes out the Cosmere so much more.
Yeah.
And there's so much tie-in to Mistborn, to Warbreaker, to a lot of these other series that Sanderson has already written and that I have read, and I can understand and see those connections, and I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
And so that's why Rhythm of War is my number one spot, but I would say Way of Kings is also there.
Yeah. We were talking about this before. I just like 2 days ago finished Rhythm of War. It was like a 3-month endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a short book.
It's hefty, but
Rhythm of War is about the same length as the Pendragon series.
Right. Right. We've talked about how it feels like book 2 in a trilogy is a lull, and book 3 and 4, I think, in whatever the word is for a 5-book series, can feel like the lull. And Rhythm of War is like not that. It is an implosion, right? It crashes together, and it's like, how have we gone through thousands of pages of book to this point, and there's still things that are, multiple twists, multiple moments where I'm like, what the hell? I never would have expected. Like you texted me. And we were talking about it, and you're like, has the thing happened or whatever? And you're like, you would know what I was talking about if you've read it. And I'm like, how? How would you know that in this book? That has happened 5 times so far.
Yeah, yep.
Just these absolutely incredible moments. And so I think I would agree. Of the series, it's definitely one of the 2, and I would have to wait until I'm a little farther out because I just read it, so I'm like a little biased.
Yes.
Like, Rhythm of War is absolutely the best of them.
Yeah.
But it very well might retain that spot, a year from now.
Yeah. Awesome. So those are the top 5. Real quick, because this is going to be a long episode. I can feel it. So what? Any honorable mentions that you want to throw out there?
I think I was able to kind of sneak them in. I think the only other one I had was Prisoner of Azkaban, because it's my favorite, favorite of the Harry Potters. So I almost included that.
Okay. Yeah, the 2 that I had that I haven't mentioned previously is Jurassic Park. I love that book. It was so good. It was so good. The book is incredible. And then Aragon. Kind of for the same reasons that I mentioned with Half-Blood Prince and The Hobbit, where it's one of those where I go back and it's like a comfort book.
Yeah.
It's just nice. It's a good read.
It is,
right?
yeah.
So,
it's very fun.
So those are the honorable mentions. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. You want to hop into board games?
I do, yeah. Do you want to start us off since I went first on books?
Yeah. So let's do this. So I thought well, I guess I knew when I was starting to make this list that there was going to be a lot of change since my list from 2 years ago, which I didn't necessarily think with my books. And turns out there's a lot of change in both. Something that I found interesting is when I'm looking at this list, when we recorded our episode 2 years ago, 4 out of these 5 games I had not played.
Oh, very cool.
So, and I will go ahead and say that I put the caveat that I had to have played the game at least 5 times to make it on this list. And so they're not like, it's not Cult of the New type stuff. I just think that where we had read a lot of the staples of fantasy before we made our initial list, we have just, what you were saying before, we consume board games a lot quicker, and we were able to consume some of the classics, a lot of the great games out there, and that is just kind of, messed with my list a little bit. And so all of that to caveat to say that my number 5 is The Gallerist by Vital Lacerda. And so The Gallerist, you are running an art gallery and trying to promote different types of artists, sell their works of art so that you can make the most money out of anybody. And so what I really like about this game is that there's a lot of strategy in this game, and the tactical decisions are pretty low, right? There are 4 spaces on the board that you can go to. Each of those spaces has 2 different actions, but you move your pawn to one of 4 spaces and you take one of those 2 actions. But the strategy in this game is so deep. There's so much going on. There's so much that you have to kind of like balance and contain and understand. And that's just why I love it. And you can knock out a 2-player game in under an hour and a half. And so it's one of these where it's easier to consume. It's like, it's quick, but it's, a brain burner. The art is amazing. They did art. They had artists that come in and did all of the works of art that you can buy, and they're credited in the rule book, which is super awesome. Yeah. And so Ian O'Toole did the art, so it's going to be great. So that's number 5. I'll run through my mech ratings, just so that we can kind of define it a little bit more.
Sure.
So for and this is number 5, and so this is where we're going up from here. So for mechanics, I had a 9. For an experience, I had a 9, and for components, I had a 10.
That's awesome.
For an overall of a 9.1.
Have you been like kind of keeping those updated, I guess, like kind of revisiting mech ratings as you go?
Yes, I do update mech ratings every time. Well, I revisit the mech ratings every time I play a game.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So that has changed recently. And it's gotten up recently.
Yeah,
so.
Like the more you play it, you're able to add a little more.
The more I play it, my experience goes up, and the mechanics go up. So I thought I have the mech sheet on my other screen. I saw you just sorted it. So,
oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I was I should get my mech ratings, and then I was
no, I'm not pulling from that. I pulled them off. But yeah, okay. So just like the more I play it, like. The first couple times I played, I was like, I'm just going to do this and see what happens. And it's gotten to the point where the strategy is starting to form in my mind, and I can kind of make some plans and figure out what I want to do. Yeah. And so that's why it's kind of gone up for me.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. We were talking, you and I, before the episode, that when actually planning for this. So first of all, we did not have I think we had the ideas for the mech system, but we didn't actually have it put together when we first recorded top 5. And so my idea in prep for this episode is I was like, well, I'll just sort it and the spreadsheet and pick the top 5 overall ratings that I have, and I guess that's my top 5. And in reviewing it, I was like, I don't think that it is. And that's a bit of a revelation that we created the mech system to try and capture as much information about a game in a single rating as we could. And I still think it's doing that. But I can, just like with the books, I could mention Name of the Wind and say, I think this is critically the best book that I know of, and it's actually not in my top 5 currently. I think games can be the same way. I think we can look at the mech ratings and say, critically, I think this is an amazing game, but it may or may not be in my actual top 5 to play.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so, all that to say, my number 5 was my number 2, I think. Yeah, my number 2 last time we recorded this. So Game of Thrones, the board game.
Nice. Very nice.
A game we've talked about a lot. I love Dudes on a Map games. I love specifically Dudes on a Map games that have a lot of political aspects, and this has that. And so I don't want to, this is a game of the games on the list, this is one that we do talk about a lot. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I think it was also maybe in both of our top 5s last time, so we spent double the amount of time on it. So if you haven't heard us rave about it, I guess you can listen to the first episode that ever came out, and you can hear us talk about it twice. But it lands at number 5. It's still holding on for me. I think it's mostly because I just haven't played it enough yet. Like I still have not run it out. I was trying to think, and when I'm making this top 5, I was trying to come up with like what games would I be most excited to play. Like I was trying to think of what books would I be most excited to reread. I was trying to think of what games would I be most excited to play. And Game of Thrones still just it doesn't bore me at all. So mechanics I have 8.5, experience I have 9.5, components I have at a 7, for an overall of 8.7. Interestingly, this is my number 4 overall.
Okay.
So it gets the number 4 overall rating.
Nice.
But it did land at number 5. So
nice. So I did do my top 5 mech. So that's so there's a little bit of a difference on how we're approaching this, which is completely fine. Yeah. But just so the listeners are aware and you're aware, I did go just my top 5 mech ratings.
Nice. Made your prep a little easier, right? You just sort the list. And
it made the prep a little bit easier. And
not that is why you did it. I'm not saying you're lazy.
Yeah. So, and the other thing that I wanted to note is, like you were saying, that we didn't have the mech rating when we did the episode. So the timeline here is that we recorded the episode, we came out with the mech, or we figured out the mech rating, then we published the episode.
Yes, yeah.
And so it's not in the audio of the episode, but if you go and look at the show notes, the mech ratings are in there because we wrote the show notes post coming out with the mech system.
Yeah.
So fun fantasy and stuff flights history there.
Right, a little trivia, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, Game of Thrones, I guess you can guess if that's the one that stayed on my list. I'll give you a hint. It may not be. But I think that's just kind of a realization of me playing more games and me liking the engine builders Euros a little bit more than like the dudes on the map games.
Yeah.
And so
I think
there's
your
just 5
taste has
games.
shifted a little bit from
absolutely.
Top 5.
Absolutely. And not saying that I don't like Game of Thrones, because I absolutely love that game. I think it's amazing. It just doesn't deserve, it just didn't make it into my top 5. Yeah. But excellent choice. And I would say that since this has come out, the new Fire and Blood, no, that's not right. That's, I don't know. The new expansion came out, which I think makes it a lot better. Yeah. The Targaryen expansion, which the Targaryens are cool, but really what makes it better is the vassals, and you can play with less than 6 people.
Yeah.
And so
the vassals
with
are almost,
that, it's amazing.
Yeah. They're not needed, but they significantly improve your experience for sure.
100%. Yeah.
All right, move us on up.
Moving on up. So this is another game that I had not played back in 2020. This is one of the top 5 board games of all time on Board Game Geek. This is Brass Birmingham. And so Brass Birmingham is a Martin Wallace design, and it is a heavy economic type game where you are building out industry in Birmingham, in England.
Yeah,
so
not Alabama.
not Alabama, which I would love that sequel. Let's do that sequel. That's great. So so it's a very interactive economic game, and the first couple times I played it, it was fairly solitaire, right? So basically what you're doing is you're putting industry tiles out onto the map, and you're trying to flip those industry tiles to score you victory and increase the income that you get every round. Yeah. Where this game makes it into the top 5 for me is when we started realizing that how you play this game is to utilize other people's resources. So when I put coal out onto the map, coal is needed to build other buildings. The first couple times I played it, it was like, I need to build this building that requires coal, therefore I will build coal so that I can use my coal. And where it really jumped into that top 5 is like, I know that Dalton needs to build this building which requires coal, therefore I'm going to build coal so that Dalton uses my coal, which then flips my coal and I score the victory points as well. Right. And so it's reading the market, it's understanding what the supply, what the demand is, and putting out the right industry tiles at the right time to capitalize on the market at the time. And it just does that so well. It's just an incredible game that, again, like works well at 2, 3, and 4 players. I played it all, and like with a 2-player game, we finish it in right around an hour 15. And so just it's one of those games that's easy to crank out, heavy brain burner, great game. Yeah,
I think this game was a real turning point for you personally. I think that from the outside, like I think this was the first time that you wanted to redefine your top 5 board games was because of this game.
Yes. Yes.
It was this one in, I think, Spirit Island. I think you got really into Spirit Island in this game at the same time.
Yep.
And I don't know that it's necessarily like where you started to really identify that this was your style of game. But I think it was the first time that I really understood that this was the style of game that you really prefer.
Okay, that's really cool. That's fun to hear. Because I agree. I think that this kind of was that like catalyst of, hey, I like economic games. This is a lot of fun. Let's do this.
Right.
Type thing.
It's why Gallerist is on the list now. Right.
It's why Gallerist is on the list, and it deserves that top 5 spot. That's Brass Birmingham by Martin Wallace. What's number 4 for you?
Yeah. Number 4 for me is Imperial. And I think that this is really funny because I've only played it one time and we played it wrong.
How did we play it wrong?
We didn't play it wrong, but we you can only so first of all, this has a rondel mechanic, and that is basically the like action selection in the game. You're like selecting in like a circular fashion, and I can pay resources to select something like really forward on the rondel and kind of like do the circuit. But there's like only so far that you can go, and we didn't know that, and like screwed up the last round and some of the scoring, and there was some misunderstanding of a couple of the rules because everybody was playing it for the first time, or maybe besides one person. So there was some misunderstanding of the rules that like impacted decisions people would have made. So basically, by the end of the game, we kind of called it like we're going to end it this way because we all were kind of playing it under the same understanding, but like we probably played it a little bit wrong.
Yeah.
This is, I think, like the most frequent game on our game night list that has not been played. Like I have put it on like every game night list for like 7 months in a row, just like hoping that people will like it. And nobody but me likes it. It's so annoying.
Dalton, all I'm going to say is that you control that list, and if you say it got picked, no one can question you.
That's true. And what I might
that's all I'm going to say.
I know, and I really want to just like put out like a survey that it's only Imperial. Like that's the only thing that you can select.
Your options are different times.
Exactly. Yeah. When do you want to play? Imperial combines dudes on a map games with like stock holding, right? So you're buying bonds into companies, and so it's this awesome concept where you're like, yeah, like I want to have dudes on my map and I want to kill my other people's dudes, but like, do I? Because like sometimes you own stock in the people that you're fighting. Like you might have stake in both of these. You are not the country, you are the investor, right? And you can have stock or you can have bond, but quote unquote stock in multiple countries,
right, taking
place in World War I. And that can very heavily influence, how you fight, how you move units, what you're doing, and I just think that's so fun. I think there's a place for both, right? I think there's a place for people that really like dudes on a map games. I think there's a place for people that don't like dudes on a map game but really like economy games, because you can get through this game and never move a dude on a map, right? Like you can. I think that would be extremely difficult to win. Like part of the advantage is taking control of companies or countries. I see I'm even saying companies. Taking control of countries so that you can do with them what you want, and make sure that you aren't attacking your own interests, you're attacking other people's interests and stuff like that. But it gives you that little bit of spice and kind of the best of both worlds. And these are two of my favorite genres. Like I'm really enjoying the 18xx games, like this, like stock holding style of game. It's a subgenre of economic, but it's not strictly the only definition of an economic game, right? And it just
this like shared benefit type thing.
Yeah, shared benefit, and it makes for a dudes on a map game that is pseudo political, right? Because you have shared buy-in and shared interest, but it's just done in a slightly different way. I could go on and on. I love the game, and I've only played it one time, and I think that's why it's on the list, is because I was thinking of games that I really want to play again. It's like I have wanted to play Imperial again ever since I played it for the first time, like a year and a half ago.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that the only reason that I never really put that it's my top choice to play at game night is that I struggle with heavier games in a virtual setting. And I think that's just like a bias that I have that I don't necessarily want to do or want to play, because for when I'm playing a heavier game, like I will physically stand up, take a step away from the table, and like it helps me kind of figure that out. And in a virtual setting, I struggle with that. Yeah. And it just feels like I don't know. It's just something that like maybe I just get better at with more plays, but I usually tend towards lighter games whenever we're doing like a monthly game night or something like that.
That makes sense.
With that being said, I loved Imperial. So I don't dislike dudes on a map games, but they're not my favorite.
Right.
And this is the dudes on the map game that I would play every not every day, all the time,
Yeah.
right? Like it is because it has that economic benefit. It has these. I don't want to attack you because I hold bonds in your country, and those decisions are super fulfilling, super interesting, and just lead to some epic choices, right? And oh man, yeah, just like you're saying, like I could go on and on. I love the 18XX games. I think I prefer the 18XX, but I've only played 18XX once. I played Imperial once, and so I'd be interested to see how that shapes up after 5 plays or so of each. But just like you were saying, it creates this economy and like decision space for the table, not necessarily for the player, that is unparalleled
for sure
in any other game. So
for sure, it's very
great
unique
choice.
in that way.
Great choice.
So, mech rating, I had 8 in mechanics, 9 in experience, 6 in components. It is kind of an older game for an overall of 8.1.
And I totally forgot to do mech ratings for brass, but real quick, 9.5 for mechanics, 9 for experience, 8 for components for a 9.1. So cool.
Awesome.
Okay, so moving on to number 3. This is the only game that stayed on my list from last time.
Oh, very cool.
And it has dropped a spot. This is Gaia Project. So this is the only game that I played before the last time we made this list. Gaia Project is the successor to Terra Mystica, where you take on this like species or this class of aliens where you're colonizing the galaxy. And it's a very heavy engine building, like not necessarily 4X, but kind of like kind of spreading across the galaxy, researching technologies, building buildings, which unlocks income for you, trying to score these round end goals. It's a super modular game, which just leads to increased replayability. There are, I think, 14 different factions that you can play as. Which all are super unique. And as we kind of go into my top 3, one of the things that's common amongst all of them is asymmetry. And that is just something that I have found that I really enjoy. I love finding something that I can do this and you can't, and I want to explore that. And I find that super fulfilling to kind of master that. And so Gaia Project is just that in spades. It's great. So it's one of those where like I to the detriment of my score, right? You're supposed to pick your faction after the board is set up.
And
but
so
I'm
that
like,
you can
I'm
see
gonna
the
play this
in-game
faction.
bonuses and stuff and see if it makes sense. If you can make a strategy out of it.
And I'm like, I'm playing this, and then I'm like, I look at the board, it's like, that was a bad choice. And so, so Gaia Project is number 3. Mech ratings, my mechanics are a 10. For personally, like I don't know how you get much better than this mechanics. Wise, it's incredible. Experience, I have an 8.5, and I think that I don't think I rated it. So the reason that's a little low is that this is a long game. I mean, you cannot sit down at the table and play Gaia Project and expect to be there for less than 2 hours. It's a heavy game. You're going to be tired when you walk away, which like that's what I want sometimes. But
it earns every bit of that. It's not like it has bad downtime or anything. Like it earns every bit of its mechanical complexity.
Yes, absolutely. And then the components that have a 9 for a 9.2. So
sweet.
That is Gaia Project number 3.
Gaia Project was in my honorable mentions. I very seriously considered. I actually was playing Terra Mystica on my phone today, basically because I was going through this, like generating this list, and I was thinking about Gaia Project. And I was like, man, I really want to play Gaia Project. I was like, well, I have Terra Mystica on my phone, so I'll at least get a semi.
Still counts.
A bit of a fix with that. So it's a great choice. Number 3 for me, I had The Crew.
Really? Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. That makes sense.
It makes sense,
That's
right?
a good
Just
game.
even hours
That's a really
played,
good
if
game.
nothing else. Like, we've said this a million times, but man hours of entertainment per dollar, it's the best that I have found.
The way that you look at it as an engineer,
right? Tell me you're an engineer without telling me you're an engineer. We've we've raved and raved about this game. I still, years later, find myself pulling it out. It was when we did our Board Vengers, one of the early ones. I think it was top game of 2020 or something like that. It was like the theme of the episode, and I had the crew for that. It's one of those games that I am most excited to introduce people to. And even though not everyone's good at it, I've found recently that it doesn't always fit into people's mind, doesn't always click. But I find even if it doesn't, I still think people have a really good experience with it. Even just playing through the first 10 missions, right? If that's all you're able to do, you can say that to people like, "Hey, let's try to get to mission 10," and it can feel like a real accomplishment when you beat it. So a lot of modularity, and when you and I sit down and we're like, "Hey, we kind of feel like playing the crew," then we can start at mission 25 or something. We can kind of pick our own difficulty level. It meets kind of that requirement that we look for in cooperative games of can I modulate the difficulty for as I get better at the game? Yeah, you can do that. It meets that. The only thing that I wish it had is I wish it had a better 2-player, right? I would love to be able to play it just me and my fiance. It basically just sets up like a dummy crew member.
It's not good.
It's not good. It functions. And so if you were just dying to play the crew right now, you can, right? But it's not as rewarding.
Do not recommend.
But the game itself, if you have $20 to spend on a board game, and I can't recommend anything else higher than this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, because you just said that, like, man hours played, I looked it up. I played over 40 hours of this game.
Yeah.
Right? And I have played it with you. I have played it with my in-laws. I've played it with my family. I've played it with my grandparents. I've played it with any walk of life that you can think of, like, after about, 6 years old. Like, you can function in the game. And it is such a simple rule set and such a rewarding experience that it's one of those, like, why didn't I think of that type game?
Right, exactly.
And so excellent choice. It's one of those that, if I sort by mechanic or my mech ratings, it's not going to hit that top 5 list.
Yes.
But it is one of those games that I will never get rid of. And it is one of my favorite games of all time.
Yeah. It actually, for me, is down, like, I think it's like around the 20th or so, just strictly by mech rating. And that's, so overall I have mechanics at a 6. And that's mostly because, like, the mechanics it's just a trick-taking game. Like, the mechanics themselves are not complicated, and so, like, I just kind of had them as average, and I still think that that's fair. Experience I had at a 9.5, and components I had at a 7. And so because of that, I think because of the, like, it's just this weird, like, spot in our game list where it's like, this is kind of like an average mechanical game, but the experience is just incredible,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that's a good choice. That's a surprising to me choice. Like, it makes sense when you explain it. I just wasn't expecting to hear that from you. And so that was fun. I'm glad we got to talk through that because The Crew is one of those games that I just cannot recommend enough.
Yeah, it's the only game on my list that takes like less than 2 hours to play. So
there you go. Yep. There you go. Cool. Alrighty, so ready to move on to number 2 for me?
Yep, number 2. Hit us.
So if anyone has listened to this podcast, I don't think it comes as a surprise that my number 2 game of all time is Marvel Champions. And I will say this with a caveat that, like, the more that I play the other living card games from Fantasy Flight Games, this is kind of Marvel Champions, Lord of the Rings, and Arkham Horror all combined into one.
Yeah.
And I want to say that they are very, very, very different games, but they're also, like, kind of thought of similarly. And so that way, and in that sense that I kind of lumped them together, but mechanically they're very different.
Yeah.
Marvel Champions is what got me into it. And so that's always kind of going to be my number 1 love of this trilogy.
Yeah.
And yeah, so living card game, we kind of had an episode talking all about living card games. So they're put out, what you're buying. So instead of like a trading card game like a Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering, where it's a randomized pack of cards that you're getting, whenever you buy a pack of Marvel Champions, you know exactly what the cards are that you're getting. And you play as a hero, and you try and take on a villain. And you have to deal damage. You have to make sure that they're not carrying out their master plan to fruition, and kind of just trying to figure all of that out. And it's a game that, again, heavy asymmetry. The first time I played it was last year in 2021, and I've played it over 250 times.
Wow.
So, I mean, like,
part of that solo gaming, right? That you're able to play it.
Most of that is solo gaming, and this game shines, I think, at 2 players. but it is very functional at a solo play. So it's super easy to set up. The theme is awesome, right? You're a superhero and you get to take on Ultron, right? Like, I mean, who doesn't want to beat the hell out of Ultron? Like that's just epic. And so just finding the combos, it's a fun puzzle. And I kind of think of these living card games as like the majority of the game to me is building my deck.
Yeah.
And so it's a modular deck where you construct a deck of 40 cards of 40 to 50 cards of Marvel Champions, and then like that's the game to me almost. And then I go play the game. But I spend so much time just like in my subconscious or in my actual conscious when I'm watching something, just thinking of combinations and how things synergize with each other.
Yeah.
And just the amount of time that these games have like entertained me for is unparalleled. And so Marvel Champions absolutely deserves that number 2 spot for me.
I think one thing that I'm really enjoying about just kind of recording this topic with you, recording this episode, is it's almost like it's a little bit of like Fantasy and some Flight through the years, right?
Yeah.
And Marvel Champions has been such an incredible influence on both of our gaming.
Yeah.
Over the last year specifically. And it's really fun to like kind of go through this and be like, oh yeah, Ender's Game. Oh, we have an episode about that, right?
Right.
Yeah, Marvel's Champions / the big 3 in LCG. Like we have an LCG episode. We would recommend go listening to us and Jason talk about that.
Right.
It's just kind of fun to hear like these themes of like, oh yeah, we've been talking about the crew, we've been talking about Gaia Project, all these, we've been talking about Brass Birmingham, right? So I knew I was going to see a living card game. I had good money on that it would be Marvel Champions. I think 2 is high though. 2 is I would have said 2, 3, or 4, but I thought it was going to be in the middle, and 2 is on the high end. So
okay, yeah. So that's number 2. I mean, like literally, if you look over to my left, I have the entire game set up. I live stream these games like 3 to 4 times a week now.
Right.
So if you're interested in that, go find it. But I love these games. It's a fun puzzle for me to solve. Yeah. And that's what I like about
Absolutely,
it.
Absolutely, yeah. Talk about evolution of us in the podcast, right? You've moved on. Your Discord emblem is no longer the Fantasy and Some Flights emblem. It's the Living Card Gamer emblem. So
all I would say, my defense in that is that you cannot have different emblems for different servers, which I think is dumb.
It's kind of dumb.
But it is that because we have like a Living Card Game Discord server, and that's where I'm most active in that server, and so that is that. But so running through mech ratings, I have mechanics at a 9. I actually think that I may want to revisit that and actually lower it a little bit.
Like now that you've played the other living card games and seen some other mechanic systems.
Yeah. And I need to be careful on how I say this. I think that Lord of the Rings is the best, most rewarding experience. Marvel Champions is the easiest to get to the table, and Arkham is the most rewarding storytelling experience. And 9 to me, I think Lord of the Rings and Marvel Champions can kind of bounce back and forth for the best mechanics rating. And the reason that I think Marvel Champions beats it out is that Lord of the Rings is the first one, and they learned so much from developing and designing Lord of the Rings that there are just a couple of like balancing mistakes that they made in Lord of the Rings that they didn't necessarily make in Champions. Yeah. And so
that makes sense. Yeah. It should have better mechanics, right? Just on paper. It should be a better game.
Right. Experience I have at a 10. Like I play this all the time.
Yeah.
And then components that I have a 7. It's a deck of cards.
Yeah. They have pretty pictures.
Overall 9.3. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Marvel Champions. I love this game.
Yeah. Sweet. So my number 2, hey number 2, hey number 1.
Hey number 1. I just watched that episode. I'm rewatching Scrubs.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, dude. Scrubs is so good.
Scrubs is so good. Especially the first season is stellar, I think.
The first season hits you like an emotional truck.
Yeah.
Go watch Scrubs. What are you doing listening to this?
Right. Go watch Scrubs. Anyways, as we have, like I said earlier, as we've gotten more comfortable as podcasters, I have gotten more comfortable and let myself break the rules. So
nice.
I wanted to make this list based on games that I like consistently want to play the most. And when we originally did our top 5 board games, we limited ourselves to not choosing Gloomhaven. And I decided to break that. Yeah.
Whoa.
I'm choosing Gloomhaven. I have been dying to play Gloomhaven for like the longest time, because I basically kind of like lost my partners in crime. They moved to Georgia, which I did not approve of, but they did it without asking. And so I do approve of the move to Georgia, but they did it without asking, and I don't approve of that. I should have been consulted. And anyways, I lost my Gloomhaven partners years ago, and now I believe that was in 2019. And I've only been able to play it sporadically since. And we've played a little Jaws of Lion content, and still one of my favorite episodes that we've ever prepped for was episode 5, the Gloomhaven episode. I loved prepping for that. It was such a fun episode to prepare for and such a fun episode to record. And it's silly to be like, yeah, my second favorite game is the number 1 game of all time. Yeah, look at me, I'm an excellent critic.
Yeah.
There are definitely like things that you could critique about Gloomhaven, right? But it survived being the new hype, right? It has been dominant on Board Game Geek. It has been number 1 for forever. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. Yeah. It's an amazing game. It's an amazing experience. And I'm just really missing it recently. And I also side note to that, I have also not been able to play like other RPGs. So I've not been in Pathfinder. I've not been in D&D. I've not been in Starfinder, any of the other plethora of RPG models that you could choose from. I've also been starved of. So there's some of that craving coming in too, where I'm kind of just wanting that experience, right? That cooperative experience, that problem solving experience, that role playing experience. I'm just missing on the whole. And so Gloomhaven's kind of like trying to encompass that too on the list of like how much I love doing that and how much I haven't been able to do it recently, which is my own fault and COVID's fault, but partially mine, partially COVID. It was COVID a couple years ago. Now it's my fault because I moved across the country. But yeah, I've been missing Gloomhaven recently, and so that's why it's at number 2.
As I get more into understanding the development process of games and playing more games and seeing the mechanics, Gloomhaven is such a feat.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, the story is incredible. The mechanics are incredible. The components are incredible. And to have kind of that formulate into one game is so rare and so well done in Gloomhaven.
Yeah.
And I absolutely 100% agree that this should be, on one of our top 5 lists. I left it off.
Yeah.
But
it was fair, I think, the first time to leave it off because it was fairly new. It wasn't new when we recorded it, but it was like
it was
still
new to
hype.
us.
It was new to us, and it was still definitely in a hype phase, and so we kind of wanted to just make sure we weren't on that wagon.
Yeah.
And so it made sense, but now I'm years past it, and I'm like, God, I love that.
It's so good. It's incredible. And like one of the things that I really like about Gloomhaven is that you play with this core group of people, and you can go through the story, but you're not limited to that, right? Like I have brought characters, or like I've shown up and like me and you, which is kind of funny. Like we did a podcast together about board games, and we didn't play Gloomhaven together, but we have played Gloomhaven together. Like we show up and we can play scenarios together.
Yeah,
and that is just another like dimension in the modularity of what Gloomhaven can and is.
Yeah,
and oh man, it's such a good game, and I'm so excited for Frosthaven.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's gonna be great.
Absolutely.
It's gonna be great. I also have I don't know if you saw this, and I know all the listeners can't see it, but they announced like the minis for Gloomhaven.
Right, yeah. We were talking about this on a recent episode.
Yeah. And so like here's my mini, because everyone in the room got a mini.
Yeah.
A prototype mini. So here's my little mini. I'll post a picture of it.
Yeah.
So here's so my little mini for Gloomhaven.
He's so fierce. Look at him. A quick mech rating. Again, this is a little silly to do because it's such a highly rated game, but I have mechanics at a 9, experience at a 10. There's basically no game that I would rather play, and components at a 9 for an overall 9.5. So this is actually my top mech rated game. So.
Okay, excellent choice.
Thank you, buddy. I think both of our number ones will be a little unsurprising.
Yeah, probably. I think so. My number 1 from 2 years ago is not even on my top 5 list. So, like in that sense, it may be a little surprising. But
that's
my
true.
number 1,
I think it's unsurprising based on how much you talk about what I assume you're going to say this game is. Yeah.
So, what's your guess?
I've cheated because I know the mech ratings, and so I know for a fact it's Spirit Island.
It's Furnace. Oh. Yeah, no. Yeah, it is Spirit Island. So Spirit Island is everything I want in a game.
Yeah.
It's a heavy cooperative game. I tend towards liking cooperative games a little bit more, and I love asymmetry, which this has asymmetry like to the max.
Yeah.
I love the cooperatives. I love the super heavy. I love the modular difficulty. Everything about this game checks every single box that I could want.
Right.
And with that said, like I don't know if there's a game or no. I will say it like this because I'm going to be positive. I am really excited for the game that takes this off my number one spot. Right? So
yeah, because you're right. It has to be a masterpiece to kick out.
It has to be a masterpiece. Spirit Island is a masterpiece, and like we have gotten to the point where there's tens of thousands of games on Board Game Geek, right? Mm-hmm. And the masterpieces rise to the top, and to find those that are going to topple our favorite games of all time, they're going to be special. And so if that happens, I'm very excited for that game. Yeah. But right now, I don't see that game. I don't see it. I don't see it. So,
but see, the cool thing though is like look through our top 5 lists here. Like, how many of these games came out in the last 4 years? Like,
yeah.
Is it therefore reasonable that like in the next 4 years there could be something to topple it? You know?
Yeah, I think. Let me check. I think 2 of mine came out in the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. So Marvel Champions came out in 2019, and no, Marvel Champions came out in 2019. That's the only one that came out in the last 4 years.
Oh, very cool.
Brass Birmingham came out in 2018, but that's just a reskin of Brass, which came out in 1776 or something. So
okay, yeah, that would be fair. I was thinking of it as a like 20. I thought it was in the last 4 years or so.
Yeah.
Because I was looking through and I was like, I know Game of Thrones is a little old. Imperial's a little old. The Crew is new. Gloomhaven is new. So I was thinking it was going to be around like 2 out of the 5.
Yeah.
For each of us.
Which is super cool.
It is, yeah.
Right?
Like, because you're right. Like, it is similar to books in that like a lot of games come out and they have to rise to the top. We can just consume games faster, like we've said, than books. But it's still like, we are not through the Renaissance, right? Like there's still a ton of innovation going on. There's new ideas. There's, things that people are coming out with that are novel, that are absolutely incredible. They're shaking things up. So it's absolutely possible that we will see something that will topple Spirit Island for you.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I think Spirit Island really will hold on though, because it's speaking of, so you said your your number 1 game from last time is not on here. That was Terraforming Mars. Right. Terraforming Mars was one of 2 games that was in both of our top 5s. The other one was Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was almost dropped out of mine, and it did drop out of yours. And Terraforming Mars managed to drop out of both of ours, and I think it's replayability. I think it's that we played it a bunch and we loved it, and then it just kind of got stale. And at this point, it's like, am I excited to play Terraforming Mars again? Like, probably not. I would love to. If somebody's like, hey, will you teach this to me? I'm like, hell yeah. Like, let's play some Terraforming Mars. But I'm not like seeking it out anymore. And Spirit Island is not necessarily that way. Like, there was a night, a month, maybe 2 months ago, where we were going to record, and we both just had a rough day at work or something. We were like, you know what, we can't really put it together tonight. We want to play a game, and we ended up playing Spirit Island.
Right? Yeah. Like, if I could write a ticket for a game, it would be Spirit Island. And so, like, I'm interested and excited to see what topples it.
Yep.
But for mech ratings, for mechanics, I have a 9.5. For experience, I have it a 10, and for components, I have a 9. For an overall of a 9.7. And so it's an excellent
hardly get
game.
Better than that.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And so just because it was kind of fun to look at the Crew, I also just quickly looked up how much time I've spent on these just the top 2 games. So Spirit Island, I played for I spent about 67 hours playing Spirit Island.
That's
and
awesome.
For Marvel Champions, it's about 123 hours.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
It's they're just fun games. I love them.
Yeah.
They're great.
Spirit Island was my highest rated game that did not appear. So Spirit Island is my I think second. Yeah, it's my second mech rated game.
Cool. That's fun information.
Yeah, it's just 9s across the board for me, for an overall of a 9. But and I don't know why I didn't. I think it was. If I was going to put it was an honorable mention, obviously. If I was going to put it in, it probably would have gone in place of the Crew. I think I wanted that 3rd spot to be a cooperative game, and I chose the Crew.
Yeah. So Number one for you, did it change?
It changed from 3rd edition to 4th edition.
That's fair.
I think at this point I do like
Still
4th
counts.
edition Twilight Imperium better. I've played it enough.
Nice. Okay.
That 3rd edition was holding on due to novelty, and at this point 4th edition, based on the fact that it's a better game, has built into enough novelty that I'm like, I like this better. But overall, no, it's unsurprising. It was one of the games that I've probably second most excited to prepare for, besides the Gloomhaven episode.
Yeah,
I would play it over and over and over again. We are looking to just to seed the interest in this. We are looking to schedule like a new players game of Twilight Imperium soon, like a noobs game, with the idea being that myself and maybe one or two other experienced players would sort of function as coaches, and we would invite new players that could be like brand new, or it could just be like someone, inexperienced players that only played once or twice, to the board, so that you have like kind of myself and a couple others as like a floating coach that you can rely on and ask questions to. We would do this virtually and sort of like try to reduce the punishment of entering this game, right? The barrier to entry the initiation energy that it takes just to play Twilight Imperium, and also maybe kind of remove some of the fear. I know we've talked about this on the podcast. I know that I struggle to enjoy games that I don't win. And I struggle to enjoy games specifically if I feel like I'm not going to win, like if there's just not a chance to win.
Yeah.
And I don't want anyone coming into Twilight Imperium to feel that way if they're going to be new and playing with someone like me who's very experienced in it. That would be a very difficult way to win. So if we do end up with any players who are slightly experienced, we're looking to handicap that in a way so that they're starting behind in resources, or other people start up in victory points, or something like that. But just kind of trying to balance the game and make sure that people who are interested in it but have always been scared to try it because it's so big, that they have a fun way to experience the game. And I think it says a lot about the game that I am willing to spend as long as it takes. I'm willing to spend hours sitting and watching other people playing this game and talking them through it, just because it excites me and I get that much enjoyment out of it. So
yeah, I don't think I had played TI when we recorded our first episode.
I think we were going too soon.
We were about to.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of talking about it when we were recording it. And so I see the appeal. I understand it. I love the game. It's a phenomenal game.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we've just been talking about for me. Like, I love asymmetry, and TI has that.
Yeah,
like
in spades. Yeah,
a lot of that. And so I really like that. I've only ever played it twice, and so that's just kind of a function of it's a hard game to get to the table. And so I'm really excited to sit in on this learner's game and try it again, because there are, I don't know, 15 factions to play.
I lose track now.
Okay, cool. So there are 15 exact factions to play.
You heard it here.
Don't check. There are a lot of factions to play.
Yeah.
And I would say that over 50% of them, I am like, that fits my play style. I would be interested in that.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like this balance of a game, because it's so long. I've like played a game with the necrovirus. Right. And it's like, I want to play another game with the necrovirus, because I kind of like understand them a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I also want to try, the trade people.
Right. And if I don't take the time to go try other people, like I may never get to it.
Right. And so there's that balance, which is a good decision. It's not a critique in the game in any way.
And I'm hoping
Excellent
in that
game.
to get to the point where, like, we've talked about this, like, there are some games that the first time you play it, you're just learning to play. Like, you're just trying to function in the game. And the second time you feel like you're really playing it. And Twilight Imperium is definitely that way. It may even take until the third time until you're really playing it. But unfortunately, because it's so hard to schedule, sometimes for some players, it feels like you never get there. It feels like every time's the first time, And you're just trying to just do basic stuff, just function and just accomplish things. And I'm really hoping that by having these floating coaches, we can bypass that, and we can be like, what do you want to do? What are you trying to do?
Right.
And people can be like, well, I really feel like I need to have a strong position here. I need to get to this point, or this technology, or have alliances. And we can be like, okay, that's a great idea. Here's how you do that. And just like talk you through, like, then do this and then this and then this and then this. And that way, like, the details kind of get washed out. And you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. I can now do the part of the game that's fun and not worry about micromanaging, right? I would hope that we can kind of help us assuage that part of the game. Let us micromanage for you a little bit, or tell you how to micromanage it, so that you can do the fun part of the game, which is the strategy and the politicking and all that stuff.
Yes. So. Yeah. Because it is a heavy game.
Yeah.
It's a very it's a rules intensive game. Like the last time I played, I forgot that I could use my like trade goods to increase my. I don't even remember what I forgot. Like that, like
I think it's that you can use them as influence. Like you thought they could only be resources and they can also be influence or something.
Yep. And so like just having the coaches to be able to walk through that, I think will be hugely beneficial. And I'm really looking forward to that because it is a game that I want to play more of.
Yeah.
That it's just so hard to.
Yeah.
It's like it was on my like, price watch list. It's like I'm going to buy this game, and then like I took it off. I was like, I'm not going to buy this game. I'm never going to play this game. Like if I'm playing this game, I'm going to play it with someone who already has the game.
Yeah.
And so, dude, it is so much fun.
Yeah.
It is a full day of fun. Like I remember the last time that we played it, like we finished the game, we went over to one of our friends' house, and like we just like talked about it, and it was just like one of the things that I think you had said it is that one of the things that you love about Twilight Imperium is not necessarily just playing the game, it's about the experiences and about all the conversations that you get to have after the game.
Yeah.
Where you get to look back and like, hey, remember when I did that?
Yeah.
And like that just makes that takes the game from good to great, in my opinion, is when you can point to something that you did and talk about it later.
Yeah. That experience, it just really sticks with you. Anyways, I have, for mechanics, I think actually now that I'm looking at this, I do not always go back and update my mech ratings. And so I think I probably had this done for 3rd edition, so I probably should revisit it. But just for what it is right now, I have mechanics at a 9.5. I have experience at an 8.5. That was influenced most strongly by downtime because there is a decent bit of downtime in the game.
Yeah.
And then components at a 9 for an overall of 8.9.
Nice. So very cool.
And that's it, man. That wraps it.
That's 10-ish great recommendations for anyone who likes what we like. So
yeah. Did we have any duplicates this time?
On games? I don't think so.
Yeah,
no.
not on games. So
we didn't have any on books either.
So.
Technically, we did not have any on books.
Yeah, because of Ender's Game versus Ender's Shadow, and we did not have any. So that's really exciting. You did it. You actually you got what we promised. We promised you 20
there we go.
Unique, and you got 20 unique.
There you go. 20 unique. So that should tide you over for a couple weeks.
You got some reading and some playing to do, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Well, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed revisiting this and kind of like preparing for it, trying to figure out what the top 5 are again, and then talking through it again. Yeah, it was fun. It's like nostalgic almost.
It is, and like we said, just a really fun kind of like a really special experience for us. We really appreciate you guys kind of being with us for these last 2 years and kind of giving us the the room and the support to look back over these 2 years and kind of celebrate how much fun it's been and how much growth there has happened and everything, and really just kind of get to enjoy that. I know that this landed as a long episode, and everything that we're talking about on here is stuff that you've already heard us talk about if you've listened to other episodes up to this point. Yeah. But it's just been a really fun and rewarding 2 years for both of us. So we were excited to record this as a special.
Yeah. So if you like what you heard, you can go find us on social media. I think the best place to do that would be Instagram. We post a lot of stuff about games that we've been playing, or the Discord. We discuss kind of books we've been reading, games we've been playing, do a lot of memes about Star Wars.
Yep.
It's a good time.
It is. We schedule these games. That's where, Twilight Imperium will be scheduled coming up.
Absolutely. Yep.
Also Imperial, which will happen.
Yes. It will happen.
It will.
If you want to see a tweet every 3 months or so, you can go follow us on Twitter. But really, Instagram, Discord is your best bet. Those links are going to be in the podcast description. So we really like talking to you. I think that's my favorite part. I mean, other than like talking to you, like talking to the listeners. It's been a lot of fun building relationships and like talking to listeners and hearing what they think. Like, Absolutely. Let us know what your top 5 games are. Let us know what your top 5 books are. Like, are there books that, or games that we need to play and you think that would fit into our list? And let's talk about that.
Yeah. If you can top Spirit Island for Nelson, let's know.
Do it. Let's do it. Let's see.
That would be an accomplishment considering how much of like the top 200 games you've played. But it could be done. So real sword and stone stuff, but it can be done.
It could be done, and I'm sure it will be done at some point in my life.
Yes.
So
yeah, absolutely.
I look forward to it.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, it was good hanging out with you. It was good doing this episode with you.
It's great.
And see you next time, man.
Cheers.
Cheers.